Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Showdown of the Sexes. This is a series where I have debates and discussions with men about the topics that are up in the collective right now between men and women, with the goal of having open and friendly airing of differences and similarities and thoughts and ideas in an open forum. And this is the second time that Zach and I have been together. Hi, Zach. It's good to see you again.
Nice
And
to be here.
so, great. And so we're going to only introduce ourselves very quickly because the first installation is on my YouTube channel. And so you can watch that and know more about us, but we'll just briefly introduce ourselves and then we'll get into the topics we didn't have a chance to cover the first time. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Zach G. I'm a dating coach / relationship coach. I do like done for you relationships. I'll build you a relationship container, help you find a partner that matches that, all the communication and conflict resolution stuff and sexual mastery that goes along with it.
Awesome. I'm Elisha Daeva. I'm the author of Before War on Marriage, Hierarchy, and Our Matriarchal Origins. It's on Amazon, and it's about our true history with women's included. And I've a past in human biology and tantra and psychology, so I'm very interested in gender issues and ancient civilizations and our true history. Cool. So let's just get into it then. You wanted to talk about monogamy versus polyamory.
Yeah. That would be a very interesting conversation. It was actually the topic of my weekly community call last week.
Oh, I should have watched it. I didn't know.
Yeah. I have the replay. I could send it to you. It was very interesting.
Cool.
But yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
So are you monogamous?
It depends on your definition. So how about we start there?
Okay.
I think for me, monogamy is. I think people use the term synonymously with like devotionally building a long-term relationship, but also they use it synonymously with sexual exclusivity. But even that's not enough to define, because do we just mean like penetration exclusive? Like, or if I am in a monogamous relationship, am I allowed to dance with another woman? Because I'm a dancer and I love to dance. Am I allowed to flirt? Is it just the sensual, just the erotic? Is there platonic cuddles allowed, or is that also a violation? So monogamy, this is part of the reason I don't like the framework. I actually use an entirely different dichotomy with my relationships. Yeah, I guess you could say I lean non-monogamous, though I am very devotionally connected and create like very solid visions of relationships when I'm in them.
That sounds amazing. And I'm really glad you brought up those nuances, because so often it gets lost. And I think, like, for me, one of the main reasons why I mostly identify as polyamorous, even though, to be honest, I don't have a lot of partners. Well, the dating algorithms were kind of coming through for me in the last couple of weeks, but I think the reason why I overall identify that way, while I have ultimate respect for everybody's own desires and for the devotional aspects of monogamy, is that, like, to me, like, it's actually sort of tragic if we can't have at least emotional friendships, like close, intimate friendships with the opposite sex. 'Cause I love men, and I have a lot in common with men, and I have a lot of close male friends. And one of the things that bums me out the most is when they get a new girlfriend and then suddenly, like, we can't even hang out or really talk, you know?
I agree with that completely. I think there's even like because something I have to be well versed in is like the YouTube Manosphere, which is like more the red pill ideology and a lot of what men like begin their foundation of dating in, and they will say like men and women can't be friends.
Exactly.
And I do think it's a bit, and I understand, and some of them go so far as to say that if a woman has an Instagram account, that's cheating. And because the reason is that you're like available for attention, like you're getting attention, DMs, you're keeping an open like field, and so they're like, you got to cut it down. But I do think it's, again, I think a lot of the lines that are drawn with regards to the boundaries of what helps a person feel safe and chosen in relationship are a bit arbitrary to me, and they're a bit weird, and they're a bit like rooted in, I guess, fear of abandonment and lack of personal safety and sovereignty, which I just can't get behind as a reason to do something.
I totally agree. And oftentimes they're not even like explicitly stated. Like I would like to go into a relationship and say, well, like what exactly are your relationship boundaries? Like what about doing contact improv, which is a very sort of intimate one-on-one kind of dance, but it doesn't need to be intimate. It's really just about maintaining a point of contact. But like, what are your boundaries? And I mean, ideally we would have the self-reflection to say why. And I do think it's oftentimes rooted in, like you say, fear of abandonment and insecurity and jealousy. Although, there are good reasons for it. I mean, there's, sexual diseases, which is sort of a whole other topic, but also just, wanting to go deep, and the very real logistical issue of lack of time. Like,
right. How many relationships can you actually hold at one time?
Exactly.
And a lot of it depends on like the frequency, of the connection, and like what you're available for. So for me, it's like always a question of like availability first. Like, what are we available for in this dynamic? Right. And then how do we want to, nurture that? So I have some friends I talk to like every week, and then I have some friends I talk to every month. Right. And then there's maybe a friend I talk to every day, and then it depends. And then like where we're at. But you can't. And when we're talking like intimate partnerships that you're sharing like sexual energy with, that's, there is a high degree of responsibility that should be taken into account when you're doing that. And like, it's like no more than 2 for me in a way. Cause it's like, how much can I really nurture, but
yeah, no more than 2. And then good friends and occasional cuddle, people I'm on cuddle terms with. I actually feel like that those things take a little bit of the pressure off of an intimate relationship, because sometimes it could just be too loaded on. Like if you're expecting someone to be your everything, your only real friend, your therapist, your gym partner, like sometimes I think we actually like are a little bit too intimate with our partners. Like maybe they don't need to be the one to hear about our insecurities. Maybe that's a better thing that's actually shared with a buddy, and maybe that would be a little bit less pressure so that we have more outlets for those things.
Oh my God, so important. Like, we're literally on the pulse. Like, this is the exact topic. We just kind of found our way into this conversation in my call. And I came across a memory, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, I posted like 2 years ago, where I said, your intimate partner should not be meeting all of your relationship needs. Because like the more life that you have outside of your intimate relationship, the more life you get to bring inside of it. And it is like a weird thing that when we say like, are you committed to me? What we really mean is, are you going to be the one I get all of my needs met from? And what you're doing is just projecting this like unrealistic expectation of how the person is supposed to serve you in a relationship. And it's just kind of, pressuring. It's so much. I mean, the model clearly doesn't work with the amount of like emotional abuse and substance abuse and abandonment and neglect. And like, so when we say, you only have to meet half my needs and not all of them, right? Like, all of a sudden the person's like, wow, now I can actually be in a relationship with you and not feel like I need to be your therapist and your gym partner and your, and your everything. Be my everything. It's like, Jesus Christ.
But there's so much pressure from society, in this sort of coupled society, to do that. I mean, right now I'm feeling bummed because like one of my friends, just got into a relationship, and I'm super happy for her. But people go into a love bubble, and I feel like that is normal, that is natural. But everything else kind of gets dropped. And then like as a single woman, like your partnered friends kind of move away from you and move into more like partnered friends, and then when you are partnered and you have a bunch of partner friends, and then you break up with your partner, all of a sudden you're super isolated because now your partnered friends kind of avoid you, and it's like, couldn't we all just be human beings first? Like, solo sovereign human beings and couples second,
Right. And it's hard. And I mean, I think that is partially the dance of like everybody trying to figure out, like, because it's like we're here to do two things, and the two things are in direct contrast, right? We're here to individuate, and we're here to like become the best version of ourselves, but we're also here to like merge into oneness with another. And like both like we feel that in our hearts and in our souls, but we also feel that biologically with one to one is sort of like how it works. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. So you do have to find a lot of work and delayering and deconditioning of like what society tells you, because there's no like shitting on monogamy here. Like there's no shit, especially when it comes to like raising kids. You do want like that one-to-one partnership, but there is a world beyond just that needs to be talked about.
Yeah, totally. It's a really tricky dance between that individuation. I mean, a lot of times we just like, and maybe this is even a chemical thing. Like so I was in a relationship for 10 years, and we moved across the country together, built a house together. And then building a house is, according to the Tantra philosophy, doing a lot of like really boring logistical tasks together is the quickest way to sort of lose your sexual spark. Like they recommend like having separate beds so you're not sleeping together all the time, going out separately, even like meeting out in the world where you see each other like separately, so you have this kind of mystery. And of course, Tantra recommends avoiding ejaculation as much as possible, and the equivalent for women.
The men.
For the men, and for women, the equivalent is clitoral orgasms, which is where you lose a lot of what Tantra calls ohas. And so, it's like, so then I was like, okay, we need to like see other people and bring that spark back because we've really lost it. And then he met somebody and fell in love, and left and got married. So that is our deepest fear, right, in opening up the relationship. And that deepest fear was met for me, which was a big deal because we have this epic homestead that like I couldn't maintain without him. And it's still a thing, like homesteading alone. So but after that, I went deep into this dive about relationship stages, and I found that the beginning stage is dopamine, which is the infatuation stage, and it's like a cocaine binge, and our bodies are really encouraging us to go really deep with this person and be really like codependent, because our genes are getting ready to get pregnant, and they want you to like make sure this person isn't an axe murderer. And then most people get pregnant around like 6 months in, almost, because I think that's the time that your body is like, if you wait too long, you'll know each other too well and you'll be sick of each other, by the time the kid is old. So the next phase is serotonin, and that's like the in love phase. And then the next phase is oxytocin, which is kind of like the family phase. And at that point, you can start to have like right around 5 years of cohabitation is where you start to see a lessening of the sexual intensity and the polarity, really. So that was like, so I went to Tantra school to try to figure out how to get that polarity back. And they were basically like, once it's gone, it's like beating a dead horse. Like you got to maintain the polarity at the beginning when you have it by being sort of tantric with it,
Yes, I'm in full agreement. I think that one of the ways you can get it back is I actually believe that even with the same person, you kind of have to go through two marriages. And this is why, like I think that there's like the attraction point between you and another person is always generally karmic. There's there's debt to clear together. There's like patterns. There's this point of chemistry, right? Like the good girl and the bad boy. They really need to integrate one another. And so like they come together and there's a spark. And so, but that's never sustainable, right? The good girl and the bad boy, unless they integrate one another, then they will fizzle, and either through toxicity or through boredom. And so, yeah, then there has to be like a separation part where you're like, okay, we need to break from like typically the sexual activity, and then you like come back together, and it's like, okay, the second marriage is the one that's going to make sense. And that's where you move from karmic relationship to a dharmic relationship, which is the one more oriented on purpose and generating money together, or like, expanding that individuation and kids. Yeah. You're building business, building family. But I don't think some people ever get out of that first one, and so they're in that like boredom or toxicity thing. But I do believe that Tantra is the remedy for like long-term sustainable connection, and I think that it does have a lot. All of the practices have a lot to do with like retention or separation. So I do think that like in my ideal partnership, there are absolutely separate beds, and maybe we sleep together 2 or 3 nights a week, you know, and but the other, it's probably majority like more so than not. And because if you don't find a way, the way I say it is like, I want to have the opportunity to find you again. Let me find you. Let me find you. I promise. I'm looking, you know. But let me
I
find
love
you.
that. That's beautiful. And part of that is finding ourselves again and continuing to reinvent ourselves and keep ourselves fresh. And then we can just keep reinventing the partnership.
Exactly. And that's the other component, is that I think partnerships have life cycles. I think relationships have life cycles, and they go through, it's like there is like a purpose for the relationship, especially when you come together on a certain point of attraction. But once that point is cleared, the relationship, like, it's just like life, it dies. And like marriage is a way to cling to like a relationship. Or maybe it's a way to cling to a person, but I think that those are the two things that are separate. I think if you cling to the relationship, you're going to be in a bad space. You need to be able to let the relationship die and then build a new one. So you anchor with the person, but you're creating like a little pod together. And then sometimes the pod, you know, it's like a crab who needs to like throw the shell off and go find a new one.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And you know, maybe sometimes the attraction is based in some type of what do they call it? Attachment disorder. You know, some type of toxic trauma, and that's not really something we want to build in. And so hopefully we can like heal that and move to the next phase. But part of the issue is that by the time the thrill starts to fade, we tend to be so like enmeshed just in the logistical stuff that's part of what we're clinging to. And that's a lot of good stuff. If those are like kids or businesses or houses or things like that, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between all of the stuff we have together. And the roles we play for each other. It's like, oh, my role is I always find the movie to watch, and your role is you figure out what music to play, or like you do the dishes. And then we lose the ability to do those things for ourselves, and then we're afraid to be alone because we're like, oh my God, he's been doing that all along. Like, I can't do that. But I like to say it as like every couple has a finite number of ejaculations. And maybe like if we're really karmically meant to be together and to walk together for life, that's a really big number. But we can either blow our wad early or really like, you know, be tantric with it and space them out.
That is super interesting. I have played with the idea similarly, but I've called it like a time limit. I think that relationships have there's like a cook time, and it's like sometimes you're cooking in like a pressure cooker, so it's like high intensity, but there's a cook time, and eventually, you know, you got to release the steam, and or you're like cooking it in the oven, and it's like maybe low heat, but there's always like a cook time. But this idea that there's like a set amount of ejaculations, that makes it really interesting. I've never thought about it like that, but I could see that being the case, because it is like, I think that's why they teach men to like hold their seed, and even you know, for me it is difficult to kind of know exactly when I want to ejaculate, because I can sort of do it on command, and so it's like it tends to be the end of the sexual encounter is when the man ejaculates. But I find it more fun to just decide that it's over because I've decided, and like, you know, but usually it's and so I feel like even with the woman that I'm like dating right now, it's the availability is kind of like every 2 weeks we spend 8 hours together, and we're like making love the whole 8 hours basically, and it's like and in the interim there's a lot of, it's like grounded in like business, and so we're supported. She's like a content marketing strategist, and I do a lot with like funnels and relationships, so we like interchange in the interim and maybe here and there, but it's like, but when we have that intentional time together, it's a lot of time, but not a high frequency, might be the way to say it. So it's really deep, really long, but not too frequent, and I think that really is supportive.
And it's intentional. And that's what Tantra says to do, is have the time together be intentional, where you're really focused on each other. you're making love, as opposed to time where you're just kind of like hanging out and cleaning the house.
Right. Yeah.
And after this debacle with the end of my relationship, which really affected my water supply, so doing all this research, and then I put a questionnaire online for people to take it, like, when about did you stop making love as much, in your relationship, and the people who were able to maintain it, what did you do? And I got some interesting data that way. And I really believe that if you're going to open it up, it's actually better to do it a little bit earlier before you totally lose your spark. Like if you're doing it right after you've lost your spark, then, there's a good chance that what happened to me will happen, which is that the new relationship energy is going to be so intense, and your old partner is like an old armchair or something. Like it's hard to compete. So, if it just happens like that, but the best way to control that is really to limit the time with the new partner. So like, I mean, if you don't hang out more than like twice a month or something, you're probably not going to reach that point where you get really entwined and you feel the need to, separate off and become new partners. Because I would love to see a world where instead of having like one partner at a time and it's really intense and then you hate each other, instead of that, the way we could have like, all the partners that come whenever and have them be partners for life and, love each other for life and be all friends.
Yeah. And I sort of have a part of my belief system is that like when you being I find this idea of like a hall pass really interesting, right? So I've seen like watch like street interviews, or you'll put people walking up to couples and be like, if they gave you a hall pass, would you use it? And this question is just so interesting to me because one of the ways that I operate is that whether I'm it doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna act in integrity the whole time. How about that? And it's like if you granted me, if my partner said you can fuck anyone you want, and then the whole world also said you can fuck me, my behavior isn't changing. So that's just the interesting thing about what I would decree as like sexual sovereignty is that you give and take it away. You think that like I choose you, and what that means is you have to give me all of your sexual sovereignty. And it's like, well, what if I kept it and I just acted in integrity, and then you get a chance to see who I am? And so the idea for me is that like when things are sort of, I do agree with you that the openness in the beginning kind of, some people say you should wait for a solid foundation. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but also if you let things sort of like be open, but you see the man or the woman in front of you as they truly are. And so it's like I have like this desire to like pursue like and connect with and grow with this woman, but at the same time there's like sometimes someone else comes into my field, and maybe it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter in terms of like some, we think it does, but it doesn't matter. It's all like who's aligned to build something with me, and then that gets to be its own separate space.
Totally. And just in my life, for some reason, it either rains or pours. And like once, if I've like been hard up for a while, it's kind of hard to meet somebody because, I have this need. And then when I do, like all of a sudden it's like, the universe, the spigot opens. And I actually do prefer two rather than one at a time, because it becomes less cathected and less codependent. Maybe just like knowing that there's another person there and not having so much, stress on one relationship. And I have found that like making a bunch of rules and being like really OCD about it, the universe has a tendency to want to break those rules. And the rules do tend to be like rooted in fear. So like, okay, you can only do this and not with this person. And I mean, I totally understand why, if there's a person you really find repugnant, like you would want to ask them not to be with that person. But at the same time, I kind of feel like if you don't trust them anyway, then what are you doing? Like you said, like, I'm going to be in integrity. And if you don't trust me to be in integrity, then maybe you shouldn't be with me. And if I'm really disgusted by my partner's other partners, maybe they're not the right person for me.
Right. And so that's the thing to consider here. And is like, it's not about the behavior as much as who you're choosing the behavior to be with. And so like, it's yeah, what kind of energy are you bringing, you could say, into the relationship, but also just like around yourself. Like if this is operated with, if the more open style is operated with an integrity, then generally like it should be generative. So ultimately, like the partnerships should be net income versus net debt.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I like that.
Because isn't that what we're doing, right? We want income, but it's not financial income in a relationship. We want like stable person to meet our needs. And so I don't know, we don't shame each other for having multiple streams of income in business, and yet we do when it comes relationally.
Or we don't shame ourselves for like loving more than one child, you know. It's
Yeah,
like, well, love for one child doesn't take away from the other.
exactly. And it's less, it's not about, because I think it's like, yeah, and you know, I don't, it's funny because you don't really see a lot of people do poly right, like well, right. I see a lot of people like who do it, especially in the Dallas community. There's a lot of fuckery and a lot of people who
Oh.
suck at communication. But the funny thing for me is it's like, okay, and isn't that exactly the same with monogamy as well? This isn't like a monogamy versus poly thing. It's that everybody sucks and has fuckery and sucks with communication. And so it's like it's like there's pros and cons. And I just happen to think that like, you know, I just happen to have a value of like of like freedom and sovereignty, and for me that just makes things really transparent. It helps me like, because there's transparency, you're also forced into like really good communication, because you don't get to maintain your partnerships if you're bad at communicating. You actually will like lose them very rapidly, and or you'll be in like toxic cycles and patterns. And so I just don't have I don't have time for that. I don't want to do it. I'm very conscious and precise with like my connections, and I think being like leaning non-monogamous has really supported me in that.
Yeah, that's you made the point I was going to make, which is that people always point to how toxic polyamorous relationships are, and not look at how toxic monogamous relationships are, especially after, you know, they get to that phase where they've used up the dopamine. And like yeah, for me it's about trust and sovereignty, like you said, because in one model it's basically like a permission based ownership model where it's like I own the rights to your sexuality, and you know I'm giving you permission or not, versus like my right to find joy and connection should trump your right to prioritize your jealousy or your fears. And that comes out of a little harsh. I don't think it's completely like that. I think there are a lot of good reasons to be monogamous, and I have ultimate respect for that. But ultimately, like even if I never am with another person, I just like the idea of knowing that like I own the rights to my own sexuality.
I also like that. And so the only argument to me that makes sense is the child one, which is like if you have kids together and you really need to keep the unit secure, but and that's like the priority, and you don't want to be tempted by outside things or whatever it may be. But even still, you know, I find that it's just poorly done. And even in those relationships, the men are jerking off and watching porn, and there's a lot of like infidelity, like energetically that's happening. And they're like, because it's like the whole like, I'm a Christian, so I can't have sex, but we can do anal. It's like, that's how I feel about people in monogamous relationships, is they're like, well, I can't have fuck another person, but hey, I'll, you know. And so it's like, what's the whole, this is why my thing is I just want to change the nature of what is being conditioned, like from the get-go. So prompt, like idea, breakthrough concept number one, I actually believe that every single human being is polyamorous. Even if you're in a relationship with one person and you're committing monogamously to one person, it's still a polyamorous relationship for two reasons. The first reason is that you have multiple containers, multiple relationship containers to meet different aspects of the needs. So you need to go into a space with that partner that is safety and security and emotional regulation. And then you have to go into a space with your partner that might be business and really strict rules and discipline. And then you might go into a domestic space, or you might, so there's different containers for different, you know, modes of being in the relationship with the same person. And that person has different aspects that you need to learn to build a relationship with. So even with one person, you are in a polyamorous relationship, because there is the you, first of all, on all of your cycles. So I'm going to get follicular you, I'm going to get ovulating you, luteal you, and fucking menstruating you, right? So, and all those at least are going to be different relationships. Also, in addition to like the actual emotional state that you're in, sad and depressed you, I need to build a relationship with. I need to build a relationship with dark and spiraling you. I need to build a relationship with growth oriented and well boundaried you. You can't avoid poly.
Totally. And then there's like my masculine's relationship with your feminine, and my feminine relationship with your masculine. And men have cycles too. Like I actually learned this. It was coincidental that within 1 month, 3 male friends sort of confessed to me that they got really depressed on the new moon. And then I was hanging out with them on the full moon, and they were annoyingly manic. And I was like, wow, this is a thing. Like men cycle too. Like, yeah. And we have our higher self and our lower self. And, you know, hopefully like we can trade off so that we're not both in our lower selves at the same time. Yeah, that's a beautiful point about that. We are many selves.
Right. Which is why I hate, and I think that's why a lot of monogamous relationships fail, is because they don't recognize that it's also a poly relationship. And I think that it's like, because all of a sudden when the person changes, you don't know what to do. You have no ability to adapt to another person in front of you and build a new container that's more organic to fit the both of your needs in that moment. And this was the most apparent thing that I learned with my parents' divorce, because my mother had breast cancer and she went through this intense deconstruction of her ego. She lost her hair, she lost her breasts, which were her two things that she most identified with, right? And so like in the process of this, I mean, this woman went through an absolute dark night of the soul and then stood up and said, okay, time to be reborn. And she found a new sense of life. She found joy.
Wow.
She decided to like be vegan for a while, and she's not anymore, but she's like much healthier than she used to be. And my dad, in the interim of this, right, is like doing his best to keep up and trying to, God, I can't imagine containing a wife with cancer. Yeah. And like what that has to feel like and how incompetent you must feel as a man. But at the end of it all, he just never was able to relearn the new person that my mother was. And like, I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she was like, I think I need your permission to divorce your father. And I said, you have it. Like,
wow,
you are new and you are not the same. But in the whole time, right, my dad's like, what? Where's my biscuits and gravy? Why's my wife not? Where'd my wife go? Right? Where'd my wife go?
He talks like that?
No. This is my, yeah. I love my dad. I fucking love him a lot. I have a good relationship with my dad. But there's something about that, the ending of their relationship, that is like, I'm never doing that.
Wow, we take on negative role models. Probably more often we have negative role models than positive ones in our culture, and nobody teaches how to have a good relationship.
Yeah. So the life cycle component is really important to me, that people understand that there's a life cycle and that your relationship is designed to die just like you are. And if you're doing marriage well, then you can relearn to build a new relationship, which is also kind of poly if you think about it.
And that's why I give the advice, like, I guess something I talk about in, actually, I'm about to launch a new book, which is called No Regrets on Travel, Trauma, and Tantra, which is about the ending of my relationship. And it's kind of like my Eat, Pray, Love of Tantra. And so I go through all this research that I found at the end of my relationship. And my advice is to like write a contract during the happy phase, during the serotonin phase, where you lay out what you'll do if you break up, like down to the details of like those towels we bought together, who's going to get them? You know, like how are we going to co-parent if we're going to have kids? That's the biggest one. I mean, that's a really, really solid one, because I believe that having kids is a much bigger commitment and a much bigger deal than, you know, a sexual relationship.
Right.
And your relationship agreements. Like the first thing, if you're going to have that kid, the first thing you're committed to is being co-parents. And if the sex lasts, great. But if not, you need to figure out what's going to happen if the sex stops or if sex starts with someone else. And so like decide what to do with the joint property, you know.
Yeah. I mean, this is just basically a prenup. Yeah. But you're suggesting even if you're not married, right? Like just have an idea.
Yep. So you don't fight about it when you're already mad.
Yeah. Remember when we were right? Because delegating gets real bitter and nitpicky when you're, in the angry phase. So if you're like, oh, baby, what would we do if we broke up? Oh, you can have the towels. No, you can have the towels. But then when you're fighting, it's like, this motherfucker, I'm taking those towels. I don't give a shit. Yeah.
Exactly. Maybe we should segue to another topic we wanted to get to, which is about women being the ones to initiate divorces nowadays more of the time.
Great.
What were your thoughts on that? I think you were posting about that, so that was kind of a topic of yours.
Yeah. What I've gathered and what some of the data suggests is that, a lot of the divorces end up due to like emotional abuse, substance abuse, neglect, and things like that. So those are like the cited reasons as far as I understand. And peeling a layer back, like I and especially, because it's not enough to be like, it's enough to be a pattern to be noticeable. It's like 80% or something, 90% if they're college educated.
Wow.
It's like,
are you sure?
Like,
I read 70, but
70. Yeah.
I'm sure there's different statistics from different places, but yeah, it's
70.
it's
more
the vast
than
majority.
55.
It's the vast majority. Yeah.
It's enough to be noticeable. And so it's like, yeah, you do have to wonder what is going on. And so I've from what I've seen and what I've heard, there is this like, it's like the man isn't like growing. To some degree, that's like the final complaint. So she'll like be there, and this is the cool thing like about women, and honestly, like women are really good at staying a lot longer than they should in relationships. And I think it's because there is this like, they just know that if a man would only XYZ, things would shift and everything would be better. And it's like, and then the woman like ends up leaving, and then he shifts for the next woman or something like that, right? And it's because there's this like locked pattern. But I think that it's like, because I think women are designed, the feminine is like designed to sort of like awaken in relationships and reach like a higher state, whereas the man is sort of designed to reach like a lower state. So he's like, I will like work until I die for you and my kids. And I will literally do that and then hope that that was enough for you. And so there's this like difference. And so I think, yeah, from what I see and what I hear and like all the divorced women that I've talked to or I'm in relationships with, like, it's just I just outgrew the relationship, and the man was not willing to find a new shell with me, so I had to leave it.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I guess that's the idea of no-fault divorce. And unfortunately, as we're seeing this pendulum swing vastly back towards more patriarchal values, we're seeing some states try to shut down no-fault divorces. But ultimately, like, if you think about it, like, what does that mean? Like, that if you no longer want to have sex with the person, that you're forced to do that? Like, I mean, that was sort of like the old idea.
No-fault divorce. What is that again?
No-fault divorce, like it used to be, like, even like in my childhood, it used to be that in order to file for a divorce, you had to have a reason within this list, adultery, abuse, something like that, as opposed to just like, it's not good anymore. We're not in love anymore. The sex isn't good anymore, and then it would be like somebody's fault,
Got
like
it.
this person did this, as opposed to just like, it's not working,
So you're saying that nowadays there's more open or less opening for no-fault divorce, or more?
There are some states that are trying to kind of curtail the rights of no-fault divorce.
Ooh, yeah. I don't know. And Jordan Peterson has talked about that. And I think he says a lot of great things, and he's really supported me, but he also says some really questionable things. And I have heard like, it's like, I've heard him talk about like, is it really that good to have an out in a marriage? And it's like, I don't know, man. Because we're playing with like bodily autonomy and personal sovereignty. And I think especially, it's just, I just think relationships have life cycles just like we do. And so and it's also, when you do things like that, it harms the women more than the men. And this is like unquestionable, because if you're talking about putting two people in a cage together, a man and a woman, guess who's going to end up with the control?
And guess who's going to end up with the black eye?
And guess who's going to end up with the black eye? Yeah. Like, so I actually personally think that having an out in a relationship puts both people on their best behavior, because guess what? I have like degrees of boundaries, and I'm willing to conflict resolve a lot. And I'm willing to take on a lot of cost in a relationship. But there are moments, and it's like, listen, my personal sovereignty to say no to this is something that we need to integrate, because that's going to cause us to be like, okay, you know, this needs to stay aligned forever. And otherwise, like, yeah, we should
Time
be
to
able
move
to,
on.
yeah.
Like for one example of something that is just an absolute no, a boundary for me is contempt. And that I've seen studies to show that, like,
It's, yeah.
if there's contempt, they're going to end up divorced in a couple years, because that's just not something that, like, I want to show anybody, you know. So that's a boundary. And of course, any type of physical threat or harm is a boundary. um, Stuff like that. And to get back to a point you were making before, like around a common complaint is that men aren't growing. My theory on that, and we can never really know, is that, like, for the past 5,000 years of patriarchy, men have been the ones to have to do all the things, you know, do all the work and be the leaders. And it's been a heavy burden. And women haven't had the opportunity to do any of those things, to work and do projects. And so, like, now that women are able to get educations and have careers and, you know, go out and learn tantra or teach yoga or like travel or whatever those things, I feel like women are like making up for lost time. Like, I want to keep growing and I want to just be ambitious, and I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't allowed to be
Yeah.
ambitious.
That makes
Whereas
sense.
men are like, you know what? I just want to vibe and chill. Can I just chill? Like, all
Yeah.
the pressure of the
Right.
masculinity, like, can I just coast and like
Mm-hmm.
just enjoy
Interesting.
long breakfasts, you know?
And I'm wondering if this is what you're talking about, but I'm seeing it as like it's like, imagine feeling like you had chains on you for thousands of years, and then you have the chains taken off. How much anticipation and excitement and nervousness, because at any moment you're afraid that the chains might come on. And so you're going to like grow as fast as possible, set your sovereignty as boundaries as quickly as possible. You're going to be like this. And then all the men around you are like, what the fuck is this wild woman doing? And there's no way I could ever contain her. Right. And so, yeah, I could see that, like, there is this like urgency to grow and like catch up to, you know, in a societal structure that hasn't felt the most supportive.
That's brilliant, and thanks for seeing that. And yeah, I think that's part of it. And it does feel like it could be taken at any time. And that's why I'm so concerned about the rise of the manosphere and this sort of pressure to go back into the house, stop
Yeah.
competing with men. Like, it's like, oh, we're gonna wake up and have our, you know, credit cards frozen or something. Like there
Yeah.
is
Ah,
that,
shit.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, I think young women aren't really aware because they don't really study the history of feminism. They're not aware that, like, literally the year I was born, women couldn't have credit cards, like, in
Yeah.
our own name, like only in our husband's name, or, you know. So,
And
like, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I think that from what I noticed is that like the manosphere is a result of like overclocked feminism. That sort of like it is the because right, as soon as like the pendulum shifts, the polar is going to take a stand. And so it's like no
Yep.
matter what it is. And so we do have to like, yeah, this is why it is important to check the men that are doing that. And I do in my own ways. I'm not able to go
Hmm.
on Fresh and Fit and talk to Myron, although that would be a lot of fun.
Mm.
And I would love that, actually. And so, because I think I could find common ground with him, because he is like basically, and because if you do look around there, what is the number one complaint of women these days? Like, where are all the masculine men? And so there is a way in which I think feminism got overclocked. It's like, I don't know why that's the word I'm using, but like it got like clocked up on hyperdrive. And then a lot of men were like, okay, well, I'll just fucking relax. Sounds like y'all bad bitches got it down, right? Like, it sounds like y'all got it under control. I'm just going to chill and like be an ally. And then like at some point the women are like, well, wait a minute. Wait, I don't think I want that. And so then Manosphere comes in and is like, hey man, you got to be masculine. And like when you're a young boy, like it's not kind of nice to hear those things, because you actually didn't hear that from your father. Hey, get the fuck up, like shut up, like you are here to learn through pain, so nut up, son, and like figure it out. And like to a man, it's actually love. We receive that as love. And so it's like there is a difference in communication. And yeah, I don't think we're at a position. I think women are far too powerful now that I don't think we'll be able to like go back to a position of like, and plus, yeah, I think we're progressing, and I would hate to see. I don't think that that a couple guys on a podcast with a couple million views are going to be the ones to change the full narrative, because yeah, I think we should be more afraid of like the weakness of men than maybe the strength in this current iteration of society. But it's just my view.
So in my book, one of the things that I trace in my history, the history of gender and our true history, is the anatomy of backlashes. And so this is the way it works. We don't just move forward. It's like it swings and then it swings and it swings, and it's largely unconscious. It's not, I mean, but individuals can make a huge difference. Like, and that's one of the things I trace in my history. Like one person, like Maria Gimbutas, the archaeologist who discovered the ancient civilization that was female centric and egalitarian, she made a huge difference. And then it was one guy who single-handedly shut her down by using his academic connections and power to insult her and shut down the entire conversation. And then it swung to, and so this is how things happen. And it's largely unconscious, but a couple of manosphere influencers influencing young guys can make a huge difference. So we're seeing now with, and it's not just them, it's like everything as a whole. And women are the ones, you know, and it's always men and women. I mean, men are pushing it from a certain way, but women are upholding it. And a lot of women do because they're insecure about their own ability to compete. And so they don't want to see other women compete with their men. And of course, it sounds really great to be supported by someone else. You don't have to work. Like, who doesn't want that? That sounds amazing. So a lot of this backlash is coming from women too. And I want to get back to this because this is like, I think, the final topic that we can get to. But before we totally leave the women initiating divorces conversation, I think another really big part of it is I learned from this book, What Women Want, the like new science of female desire, which is a really fascinating book. He found that contrary to popular belief, women actually have a harder time with long-term monogamy than men. And like that become bored with monogamy sooner than men. And part of the reason, you know, we're so conditioned to believe that women want safety and forever love and, you know, Hallmark cars and stuff, that we don't believe that. And women aren't actually like that tuned in to what turns them on because they're so conditioned to like play this role of being, you know, coy and monogamous. But, and maybe part of the reason why women get bored sooner is that men have more sexual desire overall. And so men are able to maintain it longer. And so that was one of the things they say in the book. But one of my personal theories as to the reason is that since women have such limited mating opportunities, I mean, like, you know, 2 to 10 kids max, like actual mating, like actual reproductive possibilities, there's a huge cost to every sex act, you know, biologically, with the potential of having to, you know, become pregnant and breastfeed and spend your life, you know, whereas for a man, he can basically, you know, shoot his wad without any worries. And that's like just the inherent biology of it. And so like for a man, it doesn't really cost him anything except for the cost of making more sperm, which is pretty cheap, to have sex with his partner. And perhaps men also allow themselves to fantasize about other women or have affairs more. So for them, there's like less of a cost. Whereas for women, her genes are screaming, hey, if you haven't had a kid with this guy, it's time to get up and find someone else who you are going to have a kid with. Or if you have, it's time to find another guy so you can mix up with your genes with different partners.
Yeah. Very interesting. I'm not sure where to take that.
We don't have to. I'm just putting that out to the universe.
Yeah.
You don't have to respond. I mean, it's an untestable theory, but based on my studies of sociobiology, like,
yeah, I do
good part.
I definitely like agree with you that that the cost is higher, and I think that's why women generally they need a little bit more like discernment and like a man. Listen, like if we are horny, we will fuck anything, right? That's most men. They're not that
Right.
responsible, and but partially the reason is because of the suppression aspect. And so I think it's like if you were able to have more open like dialogues about sexual desire and what it is that you liked and what turned you on, and your partner was included in that, we'd have much easier time. Like one of the most like low risk ways to open your relationship is actually to like watch some porn together. And in my because it's like what you're doing is like you're just allowing to be in fantasy with each other, and like, oh my god, this is a thing you like, and you're getting to know your partner. But yeah, there's all this weird energy and this like suppression that ends up happening. And yeah, I do think that the woman is more like I said, I think y'all are like more evoked to like awaken in a relationship. And so it's like you almost like will ride a man to God. And like that's kind of like, and so you want the best vessel, the best vehicle to your own divinity. And like, so if you don't see God in your man, then you're not gonna want to be with him. And a lot of men just lose that because, and I had a funny thought yesterday actually, where I was like, it's not that monogamy sucks, it's that your partner's fucking boring, and that they don't have the ability, they have never like tuned into sexual mastery and like tantra. They haven't really actually developed that, because I think that if you understood the pulse of like tantra and what it means for you in partnership, every man, it should be taught in schools, like the way to cultivate that energy, because it is all about like devotion and intentionality. And service in a way. And so, yeah, it's not the sexual, it's just that y'all are fucking boring. Y'all don't have any like where's the new thing to grow and learn from? And yeah, I think women, yeah, y'all are more inclined to find stronger matches, especially if the man's not, growing in some way. But then you find men that just grow, right? And they don't have the groundedness, and you're never going to be with that guy either. So we're kind of like struggling right now. Men are trying to figure out the balance, at least I am, between like, am I supposed to be like a grounded financial provider? Like, or do you want like an evoking and catalyzing man? And then where's the middle ground? Because the more I do this, the less I give a shit about your evoking. And the more I'm just going to get money and contain and be a good bank. So yeah, that's the dance. We'll have to figure it out.
Totally. And every woman might want something different. I mean, if she's very financially secure, right, then she doesn't necessarily need him to be a bank, and maybe then she just wants him to be sexy in whatever way that is for her, And then of course we can't go ahead.
I was going to say, from what I've heard, women who end up with a high status and high income, they generally still have preferences for a man of higher status and higher income than her, because there is still that biological desire to look up, from what I hear.
Well, see, I don't see that's a biological desire. I still see that as, because, before patriarchy, there wasn't this concept of male status and women choosing men for status or protection or provision. That's kind of a recent thing in the last 5,000 years. So I don't see that as a biological thing. I think it is still conditioned sociologically to say like, oh, the man's got to be better. And so the man's got to be a bigger earner than me, and this kind of, but at the same time, like a woman I do want to need a man to be smart enough to be able to at least like follow, that's crucial.
Yeah. Even if it's like 51-49, that slight power differential can create a lot of sexiness.
Well, I don't want a power differential, even if it's 51. Like I want 50-50. Like that's my goal is 50-50. And some, maybe on one day, like one person is more the leader and the other, but it has to all even out at the end, because I don't find power. I mean, yeah, in bed to play with and, switch off and do that. But that's kind of like, a game, but like in real life, I don't want a power differential at all. And then the last point about initiating divorces is I also think that like if a woman, if the sex is already dead and a woman is doing like the majority of the housework and childcare, that she's kind of like, all right, like whenever he's out of town, I have a lot less cleaning to do, maybe, and the sex isn't good. And so maybe it's time to live alone and have less cleaning, and maybe I'll have luck with the dating apps,
Well, nobody has luck with dating apps, but yes, everything else, yes. I think in 8 years, I've been on 3 dates from a dating app, and they were all actually really nice. So it's not, it's a really bad, I don't know. It's not organic. It doesn't
It's not
facilitate
organic.
organics.
That's it. The sex is so much better if you
When it's
first
organic.
have time to like be doing. So there's no pressure of like, are we going to have sex or not? It's just like you're dancing, you're at a dance together, you're at a party together. Then the sexual tension has a chance to mount while you're doing other things instead of like, okay, here we are, we're artificially deciding that we might become lovers. Now what do we do?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sucks.
Yeah. Hit me with the last topic.
Okay, so back to about the manosphere, and like I would be so incredibly excited to see you do what you were suggesting and like have discussions like this online with some of the manosphere leaders, because and like you said, find the point of similarity, just like you and I do, where we have points of agreement. And I think that's the key to shifting viewpoints, is to focus on the similarity, but then sort of approach the difference. And of course, my dream in life is to debate Jordan Peterson, because I agree with you that he has a lot of great things to say. And I listen to a lot of the things he says, but I think he's doing a lot of harm by claiming that hierarchy is universal and inevitable, because that's a really important point, like that oppressive hierarchies aren't part of our core nature. But
oppressive, no. Hierarchies, yes, but we'll talk that.
That's kind of a big topic, but like when I'm talking about hierarchies, I mean birth hierarchies. So hierarchies are good if it's like around a skill set, that the person with the skill set is leading, and not good if it's like, well, you were born in this kind of family or with this kind of biology, and so therefore you're going to be better than anyone else.
Oh, yeah, I can agree with that.
And then to what you were saying about a form of love is men saying grow through pain. I actually totally disagree with that. I think that is like the core of patriarchal programming of men. And I think it does a lot of damage to men, and is the reason why men are like, we're seeing such high suicide rates among men and such high rates of sort of like depression, is that it encourages men to toughen up and not express their feelings and not ask for support, not develop support networks. And that whole sort of like ideology of like, toughen up, lift until you're hurting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious if what if we got rid of the rest of that? Because what if we just said men toughen up and don't have support systems, don't ask for help, don't express your emotions? What if we got that away and just said men toughen up? Is that?
Yeah, I could agree. Like, and then we have to define tough, and then we have to define strong and weak, because that was your other point about weak men.
Sure.
So like I would define strong and tough in a good way that would be appropriate for both sexes, which is to state your boundaries, hold your boundaries, speak up for yourself, speak up for other people who are being bullied, speak your truth, speak truth to power, and defend the weak. Those would be my definitions of strength.
Yeah. Okay. But my brain's still on this this point of like the whole like the toughen up as like the concept, and like that being destructive. I think it's only destructive when it's like imbalanced. So like I'm sitting here as a man telling you that like when another man is on my ass about the things that I need to get my life together, that feels like he's loving me. And so, but I don't necessarily desire that from like a woman, right? I don't think that doesn't feel as good for me. And so like because in my like masculine communication, feminine communication bucket theory is that like, yeah, there's a way in which a man says you're not good enough and you can do better, and that's love. And a woman says you're perfect just the way you are. And so those two things need to be integrated inside of the person. And yes, I agree that men, like we are unraveling this currently. A part of the big problems in dating is that like men are not able to tap into that inner feminine communication that is the openness, the vulnerability, the expression of emotions, and being able to like healthfully get things out of your fucking system. And so, but as we go through that journey, you're not going to find a tough man. You're going to find a very sensitive and emotional man. And that man doesn't get a lot done and produce value for himself or the world, and he feels it. So it's like, it's this dance. And so this is why I think like Jordan Peterson to Andrew Tate, like they support the development of what is lacking by there no being fathers, like no good fathers right now. They're like faux fathers. They're like fucking actors,
Mentors.
fake figures, mentors that were like, oh shit, nobody's ever told me that I'm supposed to do things and do them well. And it's like, everybody just told me I was perfect the way I was. But as soon as we get struck in the heart by an Andrew Tate chord, we go, yeah, I'm a top G, baby. Let's go. What am I going to do today? And we start to get like hyped up and we're like, okay, let's make money. Let's make the world better. Let's make ourselves better. Let's go to the gym. Let's fucking, I'm going to pick up my room today. And it's like, we get super hype on it, but without the contrast, without the, and we need to be vulnerable and receive the feminine, we lose ourselves. And then we have the toxic shit.
Very well said. I agree with everything you said. And that type of mentorship, I think, is crucial. I think there used to be more of that in a way. Men
There's like none
mentoring men.
now.
There's like none now. And so, yeah, that's in a sense like what feminism did for women, or just groups of women getting together and having women's circles and processing our stuff and encouraging each other. That's what men need to do for men, but without the extreme disdain for women that comes through the manosphere.
I agree. This is actually my point of agreement. The only problem the big problem I have with like the Andrew Tate, Fresh and Fit, like all the manosphere is not like, the message would be fine if they were also receiving of the feminine, and it's like if they were able to speak good stories of women. But literally Myron, the guy who does Fresh and Fit, he has a book called Why Women Deserve Less. Which, like, he makes logical points as to like why the overarching value, and I've never read the book, it's just my guess, but just from hearing him, but the overarching value that you can provide, how much you can use your body as a labor force for society is less, than a man, and so therefore you deserve less. So it's like, why does the title of that like need to be that, right? Why women deserve less? It's provoking, it's, but maybe it's like, yeah, how men could do more or something. I don't know. So yeah, I don't like the narrative surrounding the feminine, and that's my big complaint, because it's just why are we on this like battle of the sexes? And even though that's the name of this podcast or whatever, but like why it's not the competing thing. We have to like realize that there's such a nurturing, such a harmonious aspect when both are combined intentionally.
In other words, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game.
Correct. Yes, thank you. That's what I meant. That's perfect.
and
Yeah.
I just go ahead.
No, just agreeing, just letting it sit.
It's yeah, and I think like I mean, first of all, Andrew Tate, I mean, this is a guy who's not only on trial for rape. I mean, who knows, but he actually, like, he's telling men to get their shit together and get their income stream together. And then his income stream was on pimping out young girls, getting them to fall in love with him and pimping them out, on OnlyFans. And then like abusing them. Like, this is the mentor that men should be following. Like, it's also not a zero-sum game between getting your shit done, growing, changing the world, and being vulnerable and sensitive. Like, we can do all those things at the same time. I think maybe that's what women, I maybe not in the exact same moment, but it's not a either or,
Yeah, but there's also like a developmental journey, like an actual, like there is a sort of linear progression, at least for the masculine experience, where like the overarching like message is just like, men, just don't even fucking date in your 20s. Like, just chill, focus on yourself, focus on your body, focus on your income. And then like the narrative at the top then too is like, once you finally worked on yourself, you actually are like, you don't need to pay the cost of monogamy anymore, because you go from like no women wanting you to like all of them wanting you. And this has like kind of been like an interesting experience that I've gone through. It is like 33 now. And I remember being like 23, and it was like, I'd be all like suave, and there was so much like game or like things. Like I had to put on this cool little front just to like try to get a shred of attention. And now I'm just like, I feel really relaxed, and there's like attraction points all over. And so it's a really interesting experience of like what it's like to cultivate yourself. And so there is this like weird thing that like a man does when we finally realize, oh, we're supposed to go on like a journey. And then like you start going on this journey, and then it is a bit of a like dismissal of the feminine, because that's the vision quest. You need to like separate, go off into nature, figure out your purpose, and then focus on it. Don't let what do they say? Saying that's like they belong to the streets. Like don't talk to women. Don't even, they just let them be over there. So it's like the story and the impact like makes sense, but there is all of this like gunky like details and messaging that comes along with it. So
by gunky we mean misogynistic, because that is boiled into it. Don't talk to women. You have to, disidentify yourself with your feminine and with your mother and all of that, which is basically saying you need to be better than women. So don't let women, drag you down to their level, is what's sort of behind that,
And I wish the word wasn't better. I don't know if you're right when you say that. Maybe you are, but I think the word is masculine. You need to be more masculine than women. And like I think what a lot of people are realizing is that a lot of women are more masculine. Like I know a lot of women with gigantic cocks. They got big dick energy, and they're out masculining men around them. And so they're the one taking command of the vision, taking command of the resources, taking command of initiating the events and creating like structures and for things, like telling people what to do. And so I think like that feeling is like, hey, don't let a woman be more masculine than you. And so like there is a way in which I don't think that message is misogynistic. I think that there is importance in understanding what that means. But if the narrative is be better than women, then I'm not a fan of that either.
Well, thank you for that. But you should understand that if by having big dick energy, that means being leaders, organizing events, making things happen, that is not a masculine. Masculine does not own that. That's your patriarchal conditioning around what masculine means. We absolutely, in non-patriarchal societies, or even in this one, all along at every stage of history that's been erased, as women's accomplishments have been erased, have done that and should do that and are incredibly good at that, because we're really good at multitasking. And we cannot give that to you. You don't get to have that. You don't get to have organizing.
Men don't get to have it. We need to be clear. Men don't get to have it, but masculine energy does, right? Because like in order to have leadership and following,
it's really dangerous to even assign it to the masculine, because it gets conflated.
That's the problem. The problem is the conflation. The problem is that men think that they have the power, when in reality, I think it's the energetics that hold the frame for us to even operate. There's a reason why the yin and yang symbol has like found its way through life, like the duality, the idea that in all masculine, there's a little feminine, in all feminine, there's a little masculine, or yin and yang, masculine and feminine. Then maybe I could say that leadership belongs to the yang energy, would be the way I would say it then, not masculine, if you don't like it.
See, I don't even know what the evidence would be for that. Like, I think women are better at leading because we're really like when we're children, when we're sitting in a circle, a bunch of girls, we wait for each other to talk. Like the sort of, but in men's circles and in co-ed circles, it's like popcorning. Like whoever kind of like shouts the loudest gets to be the next one to talk. So I think that cooperative sort of atmosphere is really a better place to be leading from. So I do think leadership is inherently, a non-gendered quality.
Sure, then I would call it tapping into yang energy. But I think there's still, if like, because in order to have something be a leader, there has to be like a follower, right? Or what would you call the opposite of leadership? Like followship? Followers?
Yeah, that sounds yeah, I mean, and that's why we take turns leading, whoever is sort of the best suited to do it at the time, and then they drop that leadership when the task is done.
Yes, and that would be like knowing your role, right?
Right.
So and maybe one day my role is masculine, and then the next day my role is not masculine, or to be in the feminine. And men do this with each other all the time. We might call it like granting the competency of your domain, and I am going to be a willing follower. And so like in order, sir, yes, sir, I'm like in my feminine, in following your leadership. is the way that like I would define that language. Or you could say I'm accessing the yin energy, like, you know, but there has to be like if one is to be leading anything, then one has to be following anything, which creates a contrast, which I think masculine and feminine
is not gendered. There is a leader and there is a follower, but it has nothing to do with gender.
I agree with you.
I mean, and it has nothing to do with masculine and feminine.
I disagree with you.
I know you do. And I think this is a really, really important point, because this is where the underlying pendulum is swinging around this idea that women should follow, and that being in your emotionality is feminine and it's bad, because the patriarchy defines everything that's in the feminine as bad and emotionality is being bad. Whereas I believe that leading from your emotions is how we, have good situations instead of wars. Like, nobody who is a leader and is in touch with their emotions could give an order for a nuclear bomb,
See, this is so that's a tough sentence, because this is where things get really tough. Because I think that I think it's important to be like in storytelling and energetic before we apply the real principle. And so, yes, it's like if somebody was really in touch with their emotions, perhaps they wouldn't push the button on a nuclear bomb. Like, and yes, absolutely, yes, there probably shouldn't be fighting at all, right? It might be, if we take that all the way, it means war shouldn't exist, is like if there were emotionally integrated human beings making the decisions on the button. And like I don't know, for me, I think I've come to terms with war in that what we're doing is just reflecting like the internal experience that we have. So again, I'm with you that it's like emotions are bad and you shouldn't lead with them. I think a part of that idea is like an emotional person is the one that emotional, like leading. I feel sad, so my decision is that we're not going to do anything today because I'm sad. I feel happy, so my decision is that I'm going to get a lot of things done. If we operate like that, then it's going to be really hard to be consistent. And so there's like, I think that's the narrative that people are trying to say when they say like, don't lead with your emotions. What you're saying is like, have a heart integrated, heart centered approach at making decisions, which is different than emotional decisions. And so I don't think you should lead from your emotions. I think that emotions guide the vision and devotion that you have regarding like leadership decisions. But it's like sometimes you just say, this is what we have decided, and emotions be damned, the decision needs to be made. So that's like one piece. And then the second piece of like the war aspect, maybe I'll pause there. Yeah.
Okay, I totally agree. Okay, I totally agree that we do need to be concise with our decisions, and if you're in a position of responsibility, you're not really able to like say, oh, I don't feel like doing that today. And the data shows that men in the workplace are actually more emotional than women, especially if we're going to include anger. So men in the workplace are more likely to have fits of anger, and more likely even than women to have fits of depression, which is what, how women express the same thing. And I think anger is a little bit more disruptive in the workplace. So I think we need to like reframe the whole thing that like emotionality is out of the feminine. Like, I don't see any data for that. But
right. And this this is like, I mean, to me, it's like saying like we shouldn't really call like a rock because a rock means hard, and we don't have evidence of rocks being rock. Like, it's like the problem is I can't go any further than like saying that a rock is hard. Like I'm blocked by that. So by saying like emotionality is a feminine characteristic, it's like saying stoicism is a rock characteristic. But if we can't agree that the rock component is stoic, then yeah, these buckets are like the duality. I'm just more talking about like the dualistic nature. And so, yeah, this is why I'm kind of bringing in like yin and yang. Like emotional energy would be yin then, and then like the yang energy would be the containment of that in direction of a positive force.
I mean, I think we could argue about all of that, but it's all arbitrarily defined, is what I'm saying, in a sense. I mean, the like Chinese Tao, yeah.
I just, because bodies dictate, yeah? Aren't our bodies a thing? And like, yeah. Like, and our bodies give dictations. And so because there are, I think, like two like distinct bodies. I mean, you have intersex bodies, but the intersex is still within a range. Like they're still within the range of the two. You're just like, you're a combination of both. So, but I think unless we can say that there are two and then a range, it's really like, that's like my fundamental starting point, is that there is a duality that exists. And the most apparent duality is the one that exists biologically. Like I said, there's sort of only one way to create life, and it's a one-to-one experience of masculine inside of feminine. And so like that dictates a lot of the reason behind why I define things the way I do.
See, however, even that most biological thing, like in the most ancient tantric texts, which kind of go beyond patriarchy and are rooted in the pre-patriarchal era, there was no concept of the man penetrating the woman, and the language didn't support that. There was not like transitive language. So instead, it was about the woman on top engulfing the man. And how much of a different experience of sex would we have if that is our core languaging around it and the most common position and the most common word to describe it?
Yeah, I actually really like that. And there's just other experiences of women really like being fucked, and
Sure.
really like being penetrated, and really like opening, and really like being taken, and really like being guided and led into an experience of fucking divine realization through that sexual connection. And I don't think that's all patriarchal. But if you want to argue that, that'd be interesting. But I do agree the engulfing.
I don't know if we have any way to know.
Sure.
Since we don't know exactly how people used to have sex. And I wonder about it all the time, because I'm also writing a fictional book about the pre-patriarchal sort of orgiastic society. So I think about this all the time. Like, what would sex be like if there was no sex shaming, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe we're getting close to wrapping up, and maybe I want to make like 1 or 2 points to just dovetail on some of the things you said, and then you can respond to those if you like and make any final points. So one thing is around war. I think like I haven't made peace with war, and I think it would be a lot harder to do if you're actually the one being bombed. Like, I mean, my book is before war, so it's like obviously my goal in life is to reach a post-war time, like knowing that for most of the world there was no war. There has to be another way. Like, imagine if instead it could be like a video game simulation where it's like, okay, here's the weapons you have and here's the forces you have, and let's have like the video game simulation, rather than like actually having real world children and buildings, and trees being destroyed, so.
Yeah. It's, see, in a way and this is something I'm willing to be swayed on, but I feel like I have made a degree of peace with war, and that because a part of my overarching philosophy is that like concepts arise together. And so like, in order for there to be an idea of war, there has to be an idea of peace. And so the two like arise mutually. So if you get rid of war, you actually also get rid of peace. And so this idea that like, because they come in tandem, the concepts arise mutually, there's going to be a difficulty like evaporating like war, because it's because it's an internal, and because it's a part of the human experience. I don't know if you can just like erase. It's kind of like the toxic positivity stuff where it's like, hey, we're just going to be in positive vibes only. And like I just feel like at the end of the day, like to suppress war is going to like create more. But it's right. What we're talking about is like conflict resolution skills on a political and global level, which if we can't do interpersonally, of course we can't fucking do it interrelationally. And how many times have you pressed the button of destruction on previous relationships? I have. And so like, I know that is like, it's tough one. But I do wish we were a little bit more attuned and connected to one another, and understanding that, because I'll tell you, there is this, so maybe this is a question to think about, which is there like a situation in which you are ready to press a button of destruction on somebody you feel that is threatening your livelihood and the people inside of it?
And that's a great question. It's it's the whole idea that war rises from each one of us, And until we've healed the trauma in each one of us, or the need to be right, or the need to win, then, you know, it will always be. But it didn't used to be, so I believe it could not be again.
Yeah, alchemizing war. Maybe that would be how do we alchemize the desire to take somebody out who is threatening us? But the part of the problem is that there is a grounded experience of like being held at gunpoint, or being robbed or mugged, or somebody like who desires to take your child. That war will begin if decisions are made like that. And so we put up these little like boundaries. It's really like an encroaching on boundaries. And it's like, if you go past this boundary, I'm going to push this button. Because the boundary doesn't include you or your particular ideology, like especially I've seen like in the sort of Muslim, like the extremists is like, we want to bring this thing to everybody, and like death to all of your religions except mine. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if that's the way you're going to act, then there will be war. And that's just like a tough thing to talk about and to move through.
And that's why we distinguish between aggressive acts and, you know, defensive acts. But as we're seeing in current conflicts, that can actually get really muddy as well.
Yep. Because who
started it? The Hatfields and the McCoys, you know?
And if I have a gun, you're going to want a gun to feel protected. And if we're both pointing guns at each other, that's a lot of tension. And the one who fires first is the one that's going to win. But again, the idea that it's not a zero-sum game is really important, because you losing doesn't mean I'm winning, and me winning doesn't have to mean you lose. So business is changing in this way. I'm noticing it. So just to say a positive sort of end is that I'm watching a lot of people move from competition to collaboration, and knowing that like my winning can actually involve your winning as well, should involve your winning. So
I totally agree with that. And that's a good thing to end on. But I kind of did want to get in this one point, if you have one more point in you, about, you were talking about like being 23 and like getting no action. And this is something I've thought a lot about, because like when I was getting towards the end of my fertile years, I was so horny. And maybe it's because I'm child free, and maybe my genes were just like, this is your last chance, you know. But it's something that's rarely talked about, partly because menopause is something that's totally taboo, and even women don't talk about it among themselves. But like, and so there's no data on this, but like, you know, then I started to have deep empathy for young men for the first time. Like just thinking about like, this is a terrible thing to go through, that I'm like trying to order meat at the meat counter at Whole Foods, and I'm just staring at his forearms going, and like, so I believe that, well, when you look at non-patriarchal societies, it's the most common couple is a young man and an older woman. And I believe this is
they're a horny match.
They're a horny match. And so like if this just was more, and it's starting to be a lot more, you know, I mean, my feed is all like, where my cougar at, you know, like, okay. So it is starting to be more accepted, although I think with this backlash, we're going to see a backlash against that. And I think that's part of the answer to the young male horniness paradigm. Is the problem is the hornier you are, the more desperate you are, and the more you're gonna like have a hard time attracting someone, because people can smell desperation. Whereas if you're getting well fucked, people can smell that and they want it too, you know. And so like, I think that if like young men, instead of taking like advice from the Manosphere that says like, you should just put those bitches in their place and like make them feel shitty about themselves so they'll like you. Instead, like, I would love to coach young men into attracting women by like doing what young women do, which is like, you know, taking care of our appearance, like taking care of our wardrobe. Like I'd love to coach young, like get a better wardrobe, or like, you know, like, yeah, work out. Like I'm not a big fan of the gym, but like go out in nature and work out, like find your confidence, you know, and instead of like your confidence by being better than women, just find your confidence in just being a great you.
Yeah, I like this. I could get a hold of a lot of that. Yeah, it's that's so funny. The horny match. No, it's from basically the ages of like 13 to probably like 35 or something. There's not a moment that goes by that we're not thinking about having sex. And it's like, it's crazy. And I do think a lot of that is like a testosterone versus estrogen thing. I think it really does like impact, and it's hard to subordinate that and to figure out exactly. This is why like tantra for a man tends to be about retention and containment, which again is why I consider masculine principles to be about containment, because it is tantrically aligned. And so, but yeah, it's a struggle. But I do agree, being like well groomed, relaxed, and articulate are like the three things that are going to be the most like supportive to attracting women. Because like, of course, if you're messy, disheveled, you want to have a good appearance because that means you take care of yourself. Relaxed means you're not letting anticipation get a hold of you, because that's how you prematurely bust, even in conversation. I fucking love you. I want to be, can I take you out on a date? I really want to take you out on a date. That's you like coming all over her, like verbally. And then like being articulate is just the opposite of that, I think, where you're able to be like, hi, like in a relaxed, well-groomed way. Hi, I found you really attractive. This is kind of vulnerable for me, but I would love to take you out sometime.
That would work for me. And I think if they are like getting laid with older women, then that increases their confidence. It kind of pops their cherry of desperation. And so the more that like we allow ourselves to I've done that for young men sometimes, is like been their first of certain things, and then and then seen them grow beyond me, and I hope their future partners will thank me.
Yes. And this is like this might be a hotter take here, but I do think like there were, I've heard that there were tribes that did this, or that this is something that was a thing where like when a woman would come of age, like an older man would sort of like nurture that like awakening, and vice versa. When a man would like come of age and could consent, then like an older woman would take him, and like there would be like a here's how you weave like sexually with intention, and let me like break that open so you can go find it for yourself. And so I think there was like the Daka, the Dakini might be one aspect of that, but there were like sexual awakeners for that, to sort of imprint them in a healthy way, so we didn't have to like go through this weird 20-year self-discovery, hurting a bunch of people in the process.
Awkward fumbling.
Awkward fumbling. Yeah. So.
Cool. Well, any final things you want to get to?
I feel pretty good. I think this, I wish that 1 million people could watch this. And 1 million people should watch this conversation. I
think so too. So if you have any ideas going forward on how we can get the word out, if you're good at that sort of thing, I'm so bad at that. And I wish, I always wish, I think there's a lot of important stuff that would love to see the light of day. And so like any friends you have with marketing skills, let's think of ideas.
No, and I will, I'm putting a lot of little puzzle pieces together. So there's going to be room, and I do want to make that happen. But in the meantime, this is amazing, and I'll send the link to my friends.
Me too. Thank you so much, Zach. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah. Okay.
One of the best talks I've ever had.
Agreed. A 90-minute banger. It's one of my favorites. Cool. I feel pretty complete. Yeah. Anything to wrap up?
No. Hope you have a great day.
You as well. Take care.
I'm safe.